Hi, it's Leatherland here from Pegasus Property. Welcome to Development 101. This video is going to be focused on different levels of risk with property investments and the different strategies that are available, where I put them into my riskometer. So if you watch the last video, then you'll be expecting this one because it's a series of videos. If this is the first video you're watching, there is other videos that precede this video, and there will be other videos coming after as well. So firstly, thank you very much for giving me your time. I hope this will be educational, hope this will be useful information for you. I've not really heard many people speak about this before, so maybe it's refreshing. And yeah, so what makes me qualified to sit here and spout about property. I've done a few projects in the last 2 years. I actually started property development about 10 years ago. In the last 2 years, I've really ramped it up. I was in the Royal Navy for 9 years. I was on nuclear submarines. I left a year ago. 2 years ago, I started Pegasus Property with my business partner, John Colclough, who's a great guy. We work really well together. And yeah, in the last 2 years, we've done 50 projects, varying from flips and buy-to-lets up to commercial to residential conversions, such as pubs and offices into residential use, etc., etc. So that's what makes me qualified to sit here and talk to you. I've got my own sourcing company, letting agency, team that do renovations for me, and we've got over 60 contractors right now working across 19 projects across the city, and we've done over £15 million worth of projects in 2 years. So without further ado, I'm going to talk about the different levels of risk in property investment strategies. So what are the low, medium and high risk investments, you wonder? So it's somewhat subjective because we've all got different levels of risk that we're comfortable with, and also it's quite geographically relevant as well. So I think this is a really interesting subject. I don't hear this being discussed a lot. Maybe it's just common sense to some people and they don't really think about it, I don't know. I was discussing this actually with a very good friend of mine. He's a well-known property developer. This was the other day we were discussing this. This is where I got the inspiration from to do this video in the first place. And yeah, we're currently putting a course together, which will probably contain some of this information. So you're getting a little sneak peek of that right now. And things that I consider to be low risk, he considered to be high risk, and vice versa. So it's totally dependent on person to person. Everyone's got different levels of risk, right? One person might walk into a casino and throw 10 grand on a roulette table. I personally think that'd be mental. Some people would do that. They're level with that comfortable with that level of risk, right? So I'm no expert by any means of the imagination. Happy to be corrected. This is all my opinion, how I see things. I'm still a student. I'm still learning. I'd love to hear from everyone that's watching this video what they think about this, and correct me if I'm wrong, basically, or whatever. So I see property development and investment in a very straightforward way. So I discussed this on my previous video. I see it as two buckets. In one bucket you've got cash flow. The other bucket is where you put your money and you get your money out. The cash flow bucket, you tend to keep a bit of your money tied up on the exit, whilst the other bucket, you get all your money in, you get all your money out with some profit on top. So they're the two main buckets that I see in my mind. On one side, cash flow bucket is things like buy-to-lets, HMOs, service accommodation, whatever, build to rent. So build a house, rent it out, and you put all your money in, and you generally leave a bit of it on the exit. So you get most of your money back, but you leave a bit behind. As a result, you dwindle your pot of investment money. It slowly dies down because each time you do a deal, you leave a bit there. As a result, it will slow your investment strategy down. You will get cash flow in return, which is awesome. But if you leave a bit of money behind each time, your investment pot is going to shrink. On the other side, you've got the bucket where you put all the cash in and the money comes back out again with a bit on top. So that could include things such as buy, renovate and sell, i.e. flips. So you buy something, renovate it and you sell it on. It could be things like planning uplift. So you get a site, you get planning permission, it's worth more money, you sell it for a profit. And it can include things like lending your money out to people. So in an ideal world, you want both, right? you want the deals where you put all the money in and the money comes back out again, and you've got the cash flow as well. They're the golden egg deals, as I call them. So things like commercial to residential conversions can often do this for you. So you can buy a pub and turn it into flats, and you get all your money out, and you get to keep it and rent it as well. Happy days. they're hard to get, right? They're harder and harder to get every week that goes by. They're getting harder to get, and you need to know what you're doing with them as well. I'd definitely consider that a more advanced investment and development strategy. So if you want to do stuff like that and you're not sure, definitely team up with somebody in a joint venture capacity, somebody that knows what they're doing, basically, if you want to go into that game, most certainly. So I was mentioning risk. So where do all these different things fall on my riskometer? So I've drawn a little high and low, and somewhere in the middle. Like I said, this is subjective, right? So depending on where you are in the country as well, these could be high risk and low risk. So I'm going to talk about HMO because that's kind of my speciality, and I think HMO is going to be a great way of explaining this. So HMO is an awesome strategy, by the way. I love it. It's how I made my money. It's what I've built my career on. But at the same time, I'm not delusional. I understand that HMO has risks involved in it. Most certainly has risks. I think a lot of people chant these certain strategies and say they're amazing. I don't think a lot of people really think beyond that. They don't really think beyond, 20 years, 50 years ahead, that kind of thing, which we should be doing really as property developers. Most certainly we should be looking 50 years ahead because, property is going to be around for a long time, right? And some of us who are younger, 50 years ahead, I'll be 80 years old. Hopefully I'll still be around then. So certainly I should be thinking 50 years ahead because I'm still going to be alive in 50 years. Maybe if you're a bit older, you're not going to think that way. But, a lot of people I meet in property who are of an older generation are thinking more about legacy and what they're going to leave behind for their children. So even they should be even that lot should be thinking ahead as well for their children's sake. So, all these different strategies, how risky are they, and what is risk? So I think that when you talk about risk, I think there's things at play that we can't control. Things like the economy, political changes, regulation changes. We can't really control that stuff. The government changing a tax thing, we can't really control that. All we can do is protect ourselves against it and be ready for it, and use it to its advantage as well. Because there's always advantages to all these things that come into play, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But just to start, I'm going to start chucking some strategies on my board. Like I said, these are subjective, and I'm going to talk you through my logic and reasoning behind them. So something like a buy-to-let, for example. So you buy a house, it needs doing up a bit, you do it up a bit, and you keep it, and you rent it out. For example, you buy somewhere for 60k in Stoke-on-Trent, you spend 20 on it, it's worth 100. You refinance it, you get loads of your money back. Happy days, ROI is awesome, yield's really high, and that's that. Where would I put that on here? I personally would put that quite low. I'd put that quite low. Now it's not without risk because of course, you've got to buy it, you've got to renovate it. Things could happen during that time. The builder could be bad. Something could go wrong in the buying process. There's still things at play that could go wrong with this. You could get a bad letting agency, bad tenant. So these are all things which is part of the game, right? Things that we can't control is the market crashing. So if the market crashed during this point, how screwed would you be? So I mean, if you approach this deal using all your own cash and you bought it for 60k and you're spending the 20, and now the market's crashing out, it's worth 80 instead of 100, you're going to leave some of your money tied up, but it's not the end of the world, right? Unless that money has been borrowed from, a bridging company or a private investor, and there's a high interest attached to that money, in which case that could cause problems. So how could you mitigate against that? Have money in reserve just in case. That's kind of sensible advice anyway. Don't over-leverage yourself and don't put all your money out there, because if the market did crash and suddenly people say they want their money back, or you can't pay them their money back, that's when it can come undone, right? Buy-to-let, I'll put quite far down on the risk. Things like flips. So flips is kind of similar to buy-to-let, really. So, but you're going to sell it instead of renting it out on the end. Again, all the things I mentioned before are still relevant to pretty much every deal. Bad builders, something goes wrong when you're buying it, market crashes. That's the same as doing a flip, really. If the market crashes and you can't sell it for what you want to sell it for, then that's going to cause a problem, right? So again, what could you do if that happened? Well, you could go onto a buy-to-let, so you could try and refinance it, put a mortgage on it, get as much money back as you can, clear any debtors, and sit on it for 5 years until the market recovers, basically. So it's still fairly safe, you know. So I'll put a flip in the same region, really, as a buy-to-let. So what else is there? I mentioned things like HMOs. So HMOs, obviously, like I said earlier, this is my speciality, so I can get quite in depth with this. But I want to try and keep it kind of simple. So that's what this video is supposed to be. It's supposed to be a simple look at where would you put things on the risk meter, and hopefully that will help you see property in a different way, rather than just jumping into strategies that either you don't understand or you don't realise as being as risky as they are. So HMO, or house of multiple occupation, essentially where you get a house and you get more rooms in there, and then you rent all the rooms out individually. You know, you can turn a 3-bed house that would rent for 600 quid per month into a cash flow powerhouse that can bring in over £2,000 a month by renting 6 rooms out individually. You know, but bearing in mind you've got to furnish it, you've got to pay the bills on it, you've got to have good management in place. You will have more turnover of tenants. You will have to do repairs. You know, you've got to run it like a hotel, really. You know, so there's way more management involved compared to a buy-to-let. You can't really just set and forget like you can with a lot of buy-to-let investments. So you've got to be prepared for that. But if you've got a good team in place that know what they're doing, like a good letting agency, then it shouldn't really be much of an issue. But you will make more net profit per month off a HMO, most HMOs, than you would off a buy-to-let. It's not always the case, but generally speaking, that is the case. And yeah, I mean, within HMOs, you've got loads of different niches as well. You've got students. Within students, you've got niches. You know, like second year, third year, fourth year, mature students, post-grads. You know, people do all male, all female student houses, things of that type. You've got professionals, so people with jobs. Within there, you've got niches, blue collar, white collar, executive. You know, so again, there's all these different niches within HMO. But the main thing is that you've got smaller HMOs and you've got bigger HMOs. So we call a mini HMO, or minimo is a term that some people have coined, which I quite like. And that's generally 3-bed, 4-bed sort of thing. So you get in a 2-bed and you turn it into a 3-bed or a 4-bed mini HMO. You know, that's one way of doing a HMO. And the other way is obviously doing larger HMOs. So larger HMOs are things like 6-bed plus. You know, all the way up to 500-bed HMOs. You know, the Royal Oak in London is a 500-bed HMO. So obviously you can go up as big as you want. But generally speaking, when people say HMO, they mean six or more bedrooms. And yeah, so that's kind of what you're looking at. So obviously these different HMO strategies have different risk levels attached to them. So if I was to put a 6-bed all-en-suite HMO into my risk thing, I'll probably stick it about there. So I'll put 6-bed HMO. So why would I put that there? Well, you know, if I was to put a mini HMO on this board, I'll probably stick it there. So why would I put a mini HMO there and a 6-bed HMO there? Well, it's quite simple, because a mini HMO is really a buy-to-let, but a buy-to-let on steroids. So we furnished it, we made it look really nice, we're renting the rooms out individually, but it's still just a buy-to-let. It could be converted back to a buy-to-let just like that. You know, we wouldn't even have to take the furniture out. Actually, we could rent it with the furniture. So that means a mini HMO has got loads. It's got nice exit strategies. Basically, it can be converted back to a buy-to-let. Why would that happen? Well, the hospital or the university or the large employer that all your tenants work or study at could shut down, or whatever. You know, the HMO as a strategy could become unviable for some reason. I don't know why, but the government could change a regulation, or the local council could change a regulation. They could council tax band every single room, and that could make some HMO investment strategies unviable all of a sudden. So suddenly these things which are outside of our control come into play, and you need to be flexible as a result. Is a 50-bed HMO flexible? You know, no, is it? Is it hell? 50-bed. You know, is that flexible? No, it's not flexible, is it? what could you do with a 50-bed HMO if suddenly HMO doesn't work? Not a lot. Not without spending a ton of money turning it into something else. 6-bed HMO, I'll put that in the middle because actually you can convert it back to a family house. You can convert it back to a family let quite easily with some minor works. You know, whilst a mini HMO is the easiest to convert back to a buy-to-let, which I would consider to be your base mark. That's your base vanilla strategy. Buy-to-let is the simplest you can do, and it's probably the safest property development and investment strategy, right? Obviously, we can argue that, but that's what most people consider buy-to-let is like the baseline, and then from there everything gets a bit more risky. So I'd put stuff like that way at the top, and stuff like that at the bottom. So, you know, again, it's down to geographical location. It's down to what you feel is risky and not risky. To me, I'm considering factors such as, you know, how much money is out there, how long is it going to be tied up for, what's the return going to be like on that money. That's a big deciding factor for me. If I've got to put 100k out and my return is going to be 25%, you know, that to me is good. Like I'm happy with that. What would happen if the market crashed? Well, if I was putting my money out into a deal and the market crashed, and I was going to potentially lose, you know, 25% of my money, you know, they're the things I'm weighing up as an investor and as a business person. That's what we're doing, right? You know, we're kind of gambling really, but it's posh gambling, like stocks and shares, just posh gambling. You know, and as investors, part of what sets us apart is our ability to assess and analyse investments and make that call. And part of that is looking ahead. Part of that is strategizing, seeing what's going on politically, what's going on with the economy, what's going on in the local area. Are things opening, shutting down? What's the plan for your area for the next 50 years? How's that going to affect house prices? These are all the little things that make us all individuals in property. And I feel that a lot of companies are just churning out people into property and they don't really talk about this stuff. And I think this is really important. This is what sets you apart from other people, basically. This is what makes you a bit more cutting edge than other people, is the ability to be more mobile. And everyone's just jumping into HMOs, you know, big HMOs, smaller HMOs. I think people are really considering this risk scale. I think that's really important. You know, what's going to happen when the next crash happens? Are you going to go under or are you going to survive? Am I going to go under or am I going to survive? I don't know. We'll see what happens. Hopefully I'll survive because I'm putting things in place to ensure that I do. But you never know. So anyway, I thought that was interesting. We're nearly 18 minutes in, so gone on for a bit. So I'm going to wrap this up now. So thank you very much for watching. I'm going to do more videos like this as part of a series called Development 101. It's going to be talking about principles of development, property development and investment, and loads of other things as well. And yeah, thanks very much. I've written a few books. I've got the Developers Refurb Manual, which is I'm going to put in the description, so you can buy that if you want. I've got a deal analyzer, which is really good. Sold loads of those, so that's a really popular product that I sell. And I've also got a workshop that I run. It's every 6 weeks typically. If you go on the link below, you'll be able to see when the next one is. But the workshop is we actually go out and look at property development projects that I'm running, that are mine, that I've sourced and financed and project managing or whatever. And then we've got Unity as well. And Unity is a group for property developers that I run. It's an exclusive group. It's a monthly membership to join. We have monthly meetings with seminars from experts, and we've got a really good Facebook group and a really good WhatsApp group as well. It's very active. There's over 50 members in the group. Loads of experts in there from different property fields, and we're all in there learning together and helping each other. So it's a great place to be. So anyway, thanks very much for watching that. Take care. Goodbye.